YouTube for the second peek. What's up, YouTube? Good morning.
Good morning.
Sorry we're a little late. We're a little late. Delane Easton is with me. You are watching Get Your News On with Ron, the world's first viewer-curated streaming news show. Delane, people have already been tweeting questions for you. So let me set it up here. My guest this week, because we usually only do one guest a week, and that was the case this week. So my guest this week is Delane Easton, who is running for governor of California. She's a progressive. First of all, Delane, thanks so much for joining me today.
I'm honored to be with you, Ron. Thanks
awesome.
for your wonderful leadership and getting their messages out on the town.
I do what I can. So let me give you like a little bit of crash course about how this is going to work. We are on two different applications right now. We're on a streaming app called LiveMe that is over here on my phone. Those folks can not see you, but they can hear you. That's why the volume's going to be up on my computer. I'm not using headphones. So whenever you're talking, I'm going to mute my mic the best I can so it doesn't echo for the folks on YouTube. The folks on YouTube, they can see you and hear you, and both audiences on the streams will be asking you questions. So when I'm looking all around and stuff, it doesn't mean I'm not paying attention to you. It means that I'm trying to filter in all the questions coming from all different sides. So don't like be thrown off if I'm like sort of looking all around and not like focusing on you. I'm just trying to filter the questions the best I can, make sure we get to ask you as many questions as possible, et cetera, et cetera. So I always just kind of let people know that, because otherwise they might feel like, what the heck, he was looking, was he chasing a squirrel? What the hell was he doing? You know what I mean? So.
Great. Happy to do however we can make this work. It's great for me.
All right. And you're allowed to cuss. So, all right. We already got some questions for you. People have been tweeting them already. So we'll go over there first. Folks on the LiveMe, submit your questions for Delane Easton. She is running for governor of California. And folks over on the YouTube, submit your questions there as well. Some of you guys submitted questions via Twitter. That's okay, but that's way harder for me to get to because it gets buried in the timeline very quickly. So yeah, try to either do it on the LiveMe or on YouTube. But first question for you: as governor, would you sponsor and pass a bill making sure primary board members and workers are held accountable when handing out provisional ballots when they shouldn't be? That's a question from Forever Voting Third Party.
I would support such a bill, and I would sign it if it came to my desk. The reality is that we have to make sure that this process is absolutely crystal clear for everybody. And of course, a lot of us are worried about what happened in the last election nationally. So yes, I would sign such a bill.
All right. Joe wants to know, what is your stance on gun control?
I'm a big believer in gun control. I was raised in a family where there were guns. We were taught to shoot, but my dad believed you should register guns. He said, I register my car. If somebody steals it, I have a chance of getting it back. Why wouldn't I register my gun? I have nothing to hide, nothing to fear. So I'm a big proponent of gun control. I do not believe that ordinary citizens should have assault weapons, should have banana clips. I was actually in the legislature when California became the first state in the union to pass an assault weapons ban. We got death threats, and we still passed it.
So let's get to some general platform stuff here as some questions are rolling in here. So give me kind of a crash course on what you stand for in regards to healthcare, in regards to education, in regards to the environment, living wages. Let's just kind of start there.
Okay, well, I'm a blue-collar kid. My dad was a machinist. My mom was a dress clerk. We lived at a time, though, where people really believed in the future of their kids. And so what happened was that I had a fabulous life because I had a wonderful education. They were able to buy their first home. They bought a little house that cost more because the schools were better. They sent me to school. And when I got to the legislature, I had an amazing career. I'd been a college professor. I'd worked in some accounting department and in a corporate plan role, and then I was a member of the city council in Union City, and we did some amazing work there. I got to go to the legislature. I got to go to be the first and only woman to be the superintendent of schools. In all of those capacities, I have focused on certain core values that I think come out of my blue collar experience. First and foremost, that everybody ought to be able to buy a house. Right now in California, the number of homeless is ridiculous. We are the richest state in the richest country on earth. We need a full court press, not only to build housing, but to get rid of Costa-Hawkins, which is the bill that was passed that prevents rent control. I believe that we absolutely must have a full court press on housing. We got to have health care for all. I support SB 562. I believe that we ought to have the equivalent of Medicare for all. And I, of course, believe in a ban on fracking. I am a life member of the Sierra Club. I belong to every major environmental group you can think of, League of Conservation Voters, Save San Francisco Bay Association, which I belong to since graduate school. I put my money where my mouth is, and I honestly think we had earthquakes before they were fashionable. Have fracking in California has a couple of really dumb parts to it. One of them is that it promotes earthquakes, and the other one is it puts polluted water into our ground. And last but certainly not least, as a kid who had this amazing opportunity to go to the University of California, even though my parents were blue collar, because tuition was free. The fees at UC at that time were $82.50 a semester, $82.50 a semester, and that included my health insurance. My best friend went to San Jose State. It was $42 to go to the state university, and community colleges were absolutely free. So I believe that we ought to pay for child development for every kid. We ought to have universal preschool for every child. We ought to have mandatory full-day kindergarten. A lot of people don't realize kindergarten is not mandatory. We're 41st in per pupil spending, bottom 10 of the 50 states. We ought to be in the top 10 of the 50 states. Budgets are statements of values. We're number 1 in per prisoner expenditure, number 41 in per pupil. That's ridiculous. And of course, in addition to making college tuition free again, we ought to be investing in building new colleges and new universities and rebuilding some of our older campuses that have real serious problems with out-of-date facilities.
All right. Yeah, that covered some good ground, and I'm pretty much on board with everything you said. Here's a couple more questions for you. They're coming in now. As governor, will you do anything about Nestle's acquisition of water in California? Stephen wants to know.
Yes, I mean, we have to have a thoroughgoing analysis of what Nestle's doing. And I really think it's important that you understand that I'm corporate free, that I'm not accepting money from any corporations. And so I'm perfectly prepared to do whatever I have to do to protect the people of California. And that includes protecting our water, which is one of our most essential natural resources and is an increasing challenge for California because of the fracking, because of other polluting that's going on. So I'm going to be a tough customer when it comes to things like Alisal Ranch. I don't believe that you should endanger neighborhoods by allowing people to have gas leaks nearby. And I certainly, as I said, I'm against fracking, but I believe we ought to have a plan to make California carbon free by within the next 20 plus years. And I walk the walk and I talk the talk. I really do have solar on my house. I have a tankless water heater and I have double pane windows. I believe that, in fact, we all ought to practice what we preach.
All right. So another question here, and this is an interesting one. I'm not quite sure how this is connected, but I'll ask it. Would you end daylight savings time?
You know, I haven't had a strong feeling about daylight savings time. I would study it. I'd take a look, put a group together to talk about what are the advantages and disadvantages. It's not one of my top issues, I'll be honest with you. I'm not making fun. There's so much to do in California, the richest state and the richest country on the planet. And yet we have the highest number and percentage of poor children. We have the highest number and percentage of homeless people. The first thing I'm worried about is not daylight savings time. I also want to say, we also have to change the economy of California. You know, when I was a kid growing up, 90% of the baby boomers actually did financially better than their parents. Today, the millennials, who are better educated than the baby boomers, have only a 50-50 chance of doing better. So we got a lot of work to do on a lot of different plateaus, and I'm prepared to do that work.
All right. And Uppity, I'm not sure I fully understand the daylight saving significance either. So maybe if you want to expand on something to give us all something to think about later. But all right, we got a lot of questions, so let's get to them. Jilly wants to know, what percentage of the military budget would you cut if you could?
Well, we don't control the military budget. That's a federally controlled budget. I will tell you that one of my favorite quotes is every bomb that is made, every missile launched, every missile fired, every warship launched signifies in the final sense a theft from those who are hungry and are not fed, those who are cold and are not clothed. This world in arms isn't spending money alone. It is spending the sweat of its laborers, the genius of its scientists, and the hopes of its children. You know who said that? Dwight David Eisenhower, the general of the armies who became a president. He was a Republican, but he believed in holding down the expenses on the military-industrial complex. So do I. So I'd lead a path to passing a resolution in California to cut back on military spending. I really do believe that it is not a productive use of our money, and we do not need to have the most money invested per person of any nation on earth is the United States of America. I don't think we need that. I think we should be investing in infrastructure and housing and healthcare and most of all education.
All right, and Winkle over on the live me, thank you very much. I appreciate it. Ask a question. Feel free to throw a question her way. DC wants to let you know that he is impressed that you committed that quote to memory. So good job there. Now here's a question for you, and I think we're going to have an interesting time unpacking this. You have taken some heat for your stance on charter schools. Can you explain your position on that?
Yes, I started out as a big charter school supporter. Al Shanker, who was president of the American Federation of Teachers, the biggest teachers union in the nation, was a supporter. But I wanted the charter schools to have credentialed teachers, and I wanted them to play by the same rules. My bill was vetoed. Another bill was signed, and it allowed a lot more, I would argue, off the reservation activities. Over time, we've come to see some charters that have been effective, but some that are cherry picking the best and brightest kids, some that are kicking kids to the curb just a week before the test because they're afraid they won't do well. In Livermore, there was a charter charging Chinese kids $30,000 a year to go to a Livermore charter and then guaranteeing them entrance into Berkeley. Crooks that are being prosecuted, but there are all over the state. There are charter schools that are not following the same rules that other public schools have to follow. So I've called for a moratorium on charter schools until we can clean up the auditing and oversight of them and make sure that we don't have people lining their pockets. And there are a lot of people that have used this to their own personal benefit. There's a recent report that's out that you can take a look at, and it shows that the examples of different charters, including one in Livermore, that have been doing crooked things. We need to tighten the rules up.
Yeah, and I understand the complexity of the issue because, like, I'm an academic myself. I used to teach at the college level, so I understand the complexity of it. It's not all A or not all B. But can you explain, like, your decision, like why support the idea of charter schools as opposed to, say, doing better investments into our public education? Because, you know, while I understand the complexity of the issue, I understand that there's some charter schools out there that are art schools that are doing amazing things for a lot of kids. I also really value the ethic of education as a public good, as a progressive. So how do you kind of unpack that?
I'm totally with you. I support education as a public good. And there were places in California where the school districts were not very nimble, and they were not allowing the arts magnets. They were not allowing different kinds of approaches that were, in fact, based on the teachers' understanding and desire to improve the pedagogy they were offering. And so there's a charter that's operates out of the Job Corps sites all around the state that does dropout recovery. These are kids that some charters don't want. They're 16 to 23-year-olds who some left school because they got pregnant at 14. Some left school because they were in a gang and they got kicked out of school. For whatever reasons, a lot of these kids are 4 or 5 or 6 years behind. They're not going to graduate by the time they're 18. So by doing charters sites at the Job Corps centers, they help kids not only to graduate or get their GEDs, they also help them to gain a trade. I think there are some really fine charters, but there are some crooked charters where the people are lining their own pockets. That's why we need a moratorium. We don't want to put the good, arts magnets and different things out of business. We want them to allow to prosper, but we also want to stop the crooks who are using the money to line their own pockets, to buy themselves cars. There was a charter school where they bought the principal a $38,000 convertible. That wasn't the intention. So you got to be able to say, we're going to make sure that these are public schools after all, and they have to play by the public role and rules. And there are charters, some charters want their cake and eat it too. They want to be called public schools and get the public's money, but they don't want to play by the public school rules. They've got to allow all kids entrance. They had charters that were saying, oh, don't send your special needs child here. We don't have a special ed teacher. That's illegal. And so it's time to clean this up. And there are some charters that are actually causing real financial hardship for some of the districts, that because they're lining the pockets of their owners or of some out-of-state for-profit company. That's not right.
So for anyone just tuning in, Kimmy, you wanted to know who we're talking to. We're talking to Delane Easton, who's running for governor of California. Feel free to fire some questions at her. She's been taking a lot of questions so far. You guys have had some great questions. Keep them up over on the live me. Keep them up over on the YouTube. Let's see here. We got some more. Just a clarification. I think you touched on this, but maybe the submitter here wasn't here. Tuition-free college, yay or nay?
Absolutely yay. I received it. I paid $82.50 a semester, and that included health benefits. Kids today, if you adjusted for the cost of inflation, that cost would be, it was $165 a year. That cost would be, less than $1,000 a year. Kids today are just drowning in debt. I have a young friend, 2 years at Riverside Community College, 2 years at Cal Berkeley, got her BA, 3 years at UCLA Law. Her debt is $248,000. That is ridiculous. She went all through public education in higher ed, but still has that kind of debt. I know other people that have $168,000, $127,000. These are people that I know, and it's ridiculous that we would do that. The whole idea of California's educational system, higher educational system, was these kids would get a great education and they'd pay more taxes. That's what my dad told me when I asked him why it was not more money to go to college. And it was still hard, let me just say, for a blue-collar family to send their kid to college. Living away from home in California has always been expensive. The books are expensive. The food is expensive. But you add on to that a huge cost of tuition, $12,000 at UC, $6,000 at CSU. You're just really breaking the backs of a lot of kids and discouraging some from going. By the way, in addition to that, we have to build some more campuses. We turned 67,000 students away from CSU last year. That's 67,000 potential doctors and lawyers and engineers and nurses and teachers and public safety people. And so we really do need these people in our state. And California used to understand that if you gave the kids a great education, you'd foster environments that would produce things like the Silicon Valley. It was born here because of our education.
Yeah, I mean, and we're just asking for free ponies, right? It's crazy to assume that the sixth largest economy in the world could have the things that other countries just take for granted, right? I mean, we're really wanting our free ponies and our instant apps, aren't we?
But I would argue that we had it in the 40s, 50s, 60s, and 70s. And
right.
The return on that investment was amazing. Remember, 90% of my generation does better than their parents. And we were the kids that got the free college. Now the millennials are only 50-50 a chance to do better than their parents, but they're better educated than the baby boomers. This has to change. And if you can speak German and you get accepted in a German college, you go there for free, even though you're a California kid. That's nuts. We should understand what the Germans understand. Invite people who really can make it in higher education to have the chance to have that education and then to go on and pay the taxes that they can in California.
So Frederick, yeah, and I'm with you. Frederick wants to know, what is your stance on the state superdelegates? And I would say use that question. What are your stance on superdelegates in general?
Well, I actually believe that it becomes a way of, protecting the people already in power. I think there ought to be less given in the way of superdelegates. And, as somebody who ran to be the chair of the 18th Assembly District back in the day, I can tell you that at that time, the John Birch Society was trying to take over the Democratic 18th Assembly District. And we turned out 642 Democrats, a lot of them young, to beat back this effort on the far right to invade the California Democratic Party. And so we have different kinds of assaults that come to us. But right now, we have too many people in the Democratic Party that were elected because they're in pocket with a lot of very big special interests. And that's one of the reasons I'm corporate free. I do not want the party to be dominated by people that are lining their pockets. And the idea that we would allow fracking in an earthquake-prone state that has water quality problems is like the dumbest thing I've ever heard. But I was 18 months talking about banning fracking before any of the other candidates even said they would consider it. One of them said they would ban new fracking. Oh, so we're going to let the ones that are already fracking continue fracking? I don't think that's a good plan. So I'm here to say I'm for banning fracking, period, full stop.
And that's a ban on fracking. You're not going to take oil and gas money and say, don't worry, I'm going to tell them to play nice with your.
I'm not taking oil and gas money, and I'm not taking big pharma, big tobacco, any of the big boys. They know they can't do business with me. And I will tell you, not that I was never going to get the big tobacco money, because I'm the one who was the honorary co-chair of Prop 99 to tax chewing tobacco, pipe tobacco, snuff, and cigars. They had zero taxation. And I was the honorary co-chair of the effort to tax those products and put the money into educating our kids about the dangers of smoking. And when the Democratic leaders in the legislature got together with the Republican governor and zeroed the money out from the elderly, blind, and disabled and backfilled it with that Prop 99 money so they could cry crocodile tears that they really hated to do it, but they wanted to help the elderly, blind, and disabled, I joined the lawsuit against them, and we won. And the court ruled from now on, when the voters vote to tax themselves to do something, and the leaders of the legislature want to take the money away, they have to go back and ask the voters. That's why Prop 1D to take the money out of First Five and Prop 1E to take the money from mental health had to go on the ballot. And guess what? The voters turned the legislature down almost 2-1. The voters get it. They want to help our kids. They want to help the mentally ill. But people in Sacramento lose their way. So you need a governor with a brass backbone. We got a 2/3 Democratic majority in both houses, and all of our constitutional officers are Democrats. And yet we still see the predominance of the special interests and richest interests in the world having too much say in California, and too little is being done for our children and for the poor. And so I'm the person with the brass backbone that's going to put an end to that. We're going to start running the state of the people, by the people, and, oh, by the way, for the people.
So to close off the discussion on superdelegates before we move on to some new topics, I feel there is one appropriate number of superdelegates out there, and that number is 0. Do you agree?
Yes. I think it's time that we really do secure the blessings of liberty to each individual by having the kind of democracy that isn't just weighted on behalf of those who already have power.
All right. So let's get back to the questions here. So definitely Human points out, I've learned more about charters in the past few minutes than I have in the past 24 years of my life. Take the compliment. There you go. Combo Couch wants to know, how do you plan on beating a strong establishment candidate like Gavin Newsom?
Well, I'm going to do it by getting on this show and being in other progressive halls, being in the college campuses, and being up and down the state. I've been to a lot of rural communities, as well as to all over Orange County and Los Angeles County and San Diego. I've been to Santa Barbara and Santa Maria and San Luis Obispo. I've been all up and down the state. I've been to Eureka, and I've been to Fort Bragg, and I've been to Mount Shasta. So I'm
You're like the Johnny Cash of California. You've been everywhere, man.
Yeah, and I visited all 58 counties when I was superintendent, visiting schools, and I learned not to paint with too broad a brush. School like Whale Gulch is a little bit, with a generator and not on the grid, was a little bit different than a school like one of the huge Los Angeles high schools with 4,000 kids. There were 12 at Whale Gulch, and there are high schools that have had as many as 5,000 kids. So, I will tell you, though, I do believe very much that California's diversity is part of its strength, but we need to listen to the whole state, and we need to make sure every kid in the state is inspired to want to get a great education. And that includes every kind of education. I want the kids to go to UC and CSU and community college, but I want the kid that's a pilot on my plane to have a great education. I want the kid who's the machinist who machines the parts in the wing assembly when it lifts up so beautifully and I land safely to have a great education. The air traffic controller needs to be well educated. Not everybody needs a college education, but everybody needs an excellent education.
Absolutely. So Limetown Jack wants to know, what is your position on Russiagate?
Well, I'm very, very concerned about Russiagate, and I obviously I'm not a fan of this president. I never thought I would see anybody who was this, I don't know, unfocused and how to say, uh, uh, absolutely unclear about the principles on which the country was founded, and such a hypocrite. You know, he'll talk about chain migration, and then you find out his wife's parents are here because he helped them come here because of chain migration. It's okay, I guess, if your name is Trump. It's just not okay if your name is something else. And so I feel very strongly that the Russiagate thing is something that every American should be terrified of. The idea that we're using the information network that America largely created, that it's being used against us, and that it might have been used to foster the election of a person who's not remotely qualified to be president of the United States, is very worrisome to me.
So how long do you think it will take? Because I mean, my issue with Russiagate is that it's been going on for over a year and a half. They really haven't had anything conclusive. The cyclical effects of this is that there's been an attack on independent media. The FBI is monitoring social media more than they ever have before. You have independent media being under attack, RT America and other. And this is, I mean, I see a lot of neo-McCarthyism going on as a cyclical effect of this. And that, to me, is incredibly concerning, especially when, what do we have to look forward to if there is any conclusive stuff here, which I don't really have much confidence there's going to be. But what do we have to look forward to? President Pence. So I see Russiagate. And when I'm talking Russiagate, I don't mean just the investigation itself. That's something separate. We don't even know what may or may not be there, although we've been giving next and nothing, and it's been a year and a half. But like the cyclical effects, I think a lot more harm than good has come out of all of this thus far. Would you agree or disagree?
I have mixed feelings about it. I do think that Russiagate is pointing at a very, very serious concern that the country has to have, that somehow the Russians really did invade our country, albeit over the internet. And they did influence the outcome of an election, albeit without any weapons. And but they're, at the same time, I worry, as you do, about the First Amendment. Freedom of speech is near and dear to me, and it's especially, you know, important that we maintain net neutrality and that we fight for the things that will ensure us access to information over the internet and free access without invasion. But you know, sometimes you have to keep your eyes open and make sure that, you know, for one of the nail, the shoe was lost. For one of the shoe, the horse was lost. For one of the horse, the battle was lost. The rider was lost. For one of the rider, the horse the battle was lost. And for one of the battle, the Republic was lost, and all for one of the nail. I think there has to be, I do worry about overstepping from our side, but I also worry about overstepping from the Soviet side, the Russian side, I should say. And I think we have to be nimble about making sure that that is not allowed to happen in the future.
So here's the thing, though. We have super delegates. We have gerrymandering. We have the Electoral College, by the way. Trump is president because of the Electoral College. To me, that's a way bigger deal than 13 trolls on Twitter that barely know English. Would you agree or disagree?
Well, I mean, I'm absolutely in agreement that we have to worry about the Electoral College. And Donald Trump, as a candidate, called for the elimination of the Electoral College. So even a broken clock is right twice a day. And so he was right on that. We should get rid of the Electoral College. Hillary Clinton won by 3 million votes, and yet she's not the president. We have a guy who's can't even keep his staff on the job more than a few months. There's a rotating door at that White House that I've never seen before in my life. And it's partly, I think, because he is an unhinged person who's leading our country. So I will just say to you, I think, yes, we have a lot of things we have to worry about. We have to keep our eyes open, but that's one of the reasons it's really important to strengthen our educational system, because we do not want people led by the nose into some kind of an oligarchy that is, and I agree with you, we have already some of the symbols of oligarchy in our country.
I would say we do have an oligarchy.
Yeah,
I understand you have to be diplomatic. I don't have to be, because I'm not running for office, but I would say we do have an oligarchy.
Well, I mean, there are some cities where we're still electing people that are the grassroots people, and there are some counties and there are some places. I belong to every civil rights group you can name, from the ACLU to National Organization for Women to the Common Cause to People for the American Way. I believe very strongly that we have to, make sure that we use our voices to prevent really awful things from happening in our country. But I also believe that it is worrisome that the Soviet Union now turned into Russia, which is filled with a lot of people with very bad ideas, also very evil ideas, should be allowed to somehow influence our elections. We have to worry about that. And worry about the other things as well. We have to worry about the oligarchy. I don't disagree with that.
All right. I understand. And I also understand your position, but I think you have a little more optimism in this process than I do.
Optimism is a political act. That's one of the things I always say to young people. We need you to stay optimistic and take this country back. And, the word idiot was invented by the Greeks. They invented the word democracy, means government by the people, demos and kratos. They also invented the word idiot, which meant one who does not participate in politics. And my worry is that some people are getting so cynical, they say, what's the point? I'm not going to get involved. And we got to keep people involved. This is a critical moment in the history of our state and our nation. We got to engage people, young and old, to take back our country.
I agree with you there. Yeah, no, I meant cynicism in regards to Russiagate. I mean, these intelligence agencies, they have it out for Trump, but they have it out for all the wrong reasons. They don't dislike Trump because he's morally repulsive. They dislike Trump because they're worried he's not going to be able to continue the military-industrial complex with a smile on his face. Not because he has some moral opposition to it, but because he's that big of a nincompoop. That's kind of what I think's going on. But, time will tell. So would you sign Assembly Bill 2402 protecting the privacy of recreational marijuana consumers? And do you support making California a sanctuary state for cannabis users against the federal government?
I support California being a sanctuary state, period. I do believe we have to have some rules about driving under the influence and some things like that. But in general, the people have voted to legalize cannabis in the state of California, and the federal government should keep its mitts off. In fact, I'll go further. I would create a state bank so that people that are, in fact, in this business would have a safe place to deposit their money. There are other benefits of having a state bank. There are some young business people that would like to start companies that have a heck of a hard time getting a loan from some of the big banks, and they want just millions of dollars in fees. And so if we had a state bank, I think it would give us lots of other options, not just a place to deposit cannabis money.
All right. Let's see here. How do you propose, this is from Kate, how do you propose California participate in a Green New Deal? Russiagate is causing the average citizen to be cynical. I don't care and think it is a distraction from what politicians are doing.
Well, I think that's what I mean when I say that optimism is a political act. The fact is, if you get convinced that there's no point in participating, that you can't make a difference, that you aren't really being listened to, there's no reason to vote, then they win. So what we have to do is make sure we understand that one of the best messages we could send would be electing me governor, because it would send the message that somebody who's unbought and unbossed can actually win a race in California and can go on to do the right things for the right reasons for the people of the state. But if we continue on the path we are on, the richest state and the richest country on earth with the highest number of homeless people and percentage of homeless people, highest number and percentage of poor people, we are on the wrong path. And so it's not enough to just say you're a Democrat. You got to be a Democrat with a brass backbone that's going to stand for the people, for the children, for the seniors. Hubert Humphrey was eloquent when he said, the moral test of any government is how it treats those in the dawn of life, its children, in the twilight of life, its seniors, and the shadows of life, the sick and needy. We are failing our children, we are failing our seniors, and we are failing our sick and needy. We need to do a better job in California, and we can do it by getting our priorities straight.
All right, so I know you got a heart out here soon, so I'm going to try to get to as many as we can. So can you touch upon what you would do in terms of a Green New Deal for California?
Well, I'm the best environmental candidate in the state. I have the best record, the best track record, as well as I wrote a bunch of legislation that cleaned up all landfills, the biggest ever in history. I wrote a bunch of recycling legislation. A lot of people think of me as education only. I have very strong credentials in transportation and a whole host of other areas. And I just will tell you that California can and should be the greenest state in the union. And we can and should be doing things like getting rid of fossil fuels, banning fracking, of course, but also protecting our coastline. The climate change is real. I'm fond of saying I believe in something called science. Well, you know you're living in a terrible time when you see a memo from the Centers for Disease Control that orders its staff to no longer use the word science-based or evidence-based. Hello? This is America. Free speech, and what in the world are we talking about here? So I believe that we have to have a nimble governor who's going to really take the time and give the attention to the coastline of California because of what's going to happen with sea rise. You know, we should be talking to people in the Netherlands who've done such an amazing job of protecting their coastlines because, in fact, they have reclaimed a lot of their land from the ocean and from the sea. So, you know, there's things we can and should be doing all over the state that will help us to conserve more energy. That means we have to produce less, to diversify our energy production. Yes, more to wind and solar, but also geothermal. You know that Iceland gets more than half of its energy from geothermal. We can't do that everywhere in the state, but there are some parts of the state where we could be getting a lot more energy from geothermal. So I'm the greenest candidate, and I'm committed to doing the things that need to be done to make this not only the greenest state, but the most prosperous, well-educated state with the best housing for all.
Who will you be supporting? And I'm just going like kind of rapid fire here because I know you got a heart out and we got a lot of questions. We're not going to get to all of them. Who are you supporting in the California Senate race?
I have not formally taken a position. I'll be honest with you. I think there are some strong candidates for different reasons. I obviously have supported Dianne Feinstein for a number of years, and I think I have to tell you, I really do believe that she has had a brass backbone on a lot of important issues. Kevin De Leon also has a lot of strengths, but I do worry a bit. He wasn't as nimble about stepping up on the issues of harassment of women in the Senate as I wish he had been. And I do worry about that. I know a number of people in the legislature that are concerned that he hasn't been as attentive to some issues that were before him, and he hasn't been as even-handed with some of the members. So I'm leaning toward Feinstein.
So Dianne Feinstein, who is a Democrat in name only, she's anti-single payer and very open about it. She takes corporate money. I mean, it seems like she is the total opposite of you in every way. Why would you be endorsing her?
You know, we go back a ways. I think Dianne has been someone who has been this most articulate, strongest person on gun control in the United States Senate. She stood up, and when one of the men made fun of her about supporting gun control and said, "What do you know about guns?" She said, "Have you ever held a man's head in your lap as he bled to death because he'd been shot by a gun?" I think, you know, there are things that she has supported in terms of rights for women and families that I feel very strongly about. And there's actually another woman running for Senate that I also am drawn to. Yeah. And so I haven't, as I said, I have not made an endorsement. I think all of them have strengths and all of them have weaknesses. And that's why I haven't made an endorsement yet. I'm continuing to review.
Well, I really hope you don't go for Dianne Feinstein. First of all, I think that could hurt you a lot. And second of all, I mean, that story was very nice. And I'm sure she has done some okay things over the years. But she is the total opposite of a progressive. And she is one of the, I mean, she's one of the things holding the Democratic Party back. Those types of politicians, that's kind of what needs to go to kind of usher in a new era. And I think we're in a position where the party either needs to be hijacked by progressives or we need a new party altogether. And politicians like Dianne Feinstein, who literally uses right-wing talking points to poo-poo on single payer. That's what needs to go. I'm sorry. I'm sure she's a nice lady. You're friends with her. I'm sure she, she has some nice speaking points on the gun issue, which, although we haven't really seen, I mean, we still get a school shooting almost every other day. So, I mean, nice stories are great, but until we see some real change in this country as far as gun policy, and there's so many things we could do. We could do stuff similar to what Australia does, stuff similar to what Switzerland does, a combination of thereof, extensive background checks, mandatory classes, registration, as you pointed out, ammo regulation. I favor all of the above. I've not seen anything concrete for her policy-wise, Dianne Feinstein. So, nice stories be damned. I believe it where the proof's in the pudding. And Dianne Feinstein is the opposite of a progressive. And I think if you endorse her, it will hurt you. I strongly encourage you not to.
As I said, I have not made an endorsement, but it bothers me very much that Kevin De Leon's roommate was one of the men that was harassing women, going to the front door in a towel to let young interns into his office, supposedly into his room, his apartment. Kevin said he knew nothing about it. Well, if my roommate was walking around in a towel, I might notice it. The bottom line is
there's three great progressives in that race. There's Allison Hartson, there's David Hildebrand, there's Pat Harris. I strongly encourage you to look into them because I know all three of them. I'd be happy to vote for any of those. They're excellent candidates. The other two, you know how they're different than you? They take corporate money. Dianne Feinstein and Kevin De Leon. So when there's 5 candidates and 3 of them are good, 2 are eliminated real quick, and they're the 2 you mentioned.
And that's why I'm still reviewing the other candidates. I said I had not yet made a decision, but I will tell you that I don't like the corporate money, and that's why I'm not taking it. And I do worry about that. And so I am reviewing the other candidates for United States Senate as well.
All right. Well, awesome. So you got to go, right? You have a hard out at 10 till?
I have a plane to catch.
Oh, wow. Okay. Let's see here.
Turn in a car.
All right. So let's just kind of close now then, because I don't think there's anything here. All right. All right. This is a heavy one too. Do you think the DNC screwed over Bernie in the primary?
Yes, I do. I think that we need to have a thoroughgoing review of the DNC and the California Democratic Party. I was a Kimberly Ellis supporter, and I was the only candidate who was only a Kimberly Ellis supporter. And if you were at that convention, there was overwhelming energy for Kimberly. And I kept saying to people, I looked at people's proxies and I say, "Were you so-and-so?" And they, "Oh, no, I'm a proxy for them." There were a lot of people, I think, that felt that that was not well managed, that election. And there was a real feeling that something had been stolen. And I think it's important that we get our own party in California in shape, as well as getting the national party in shape. And I think, but charity begins at home, and you ought to take care of your own house first. And California needs to make sure its house is in order. That includes changing the delegate issues that you were talking about earlier.
All right, great. I appreciate you being willing to close on that question, because it's kind of a heavy one that we could talk about for a long time, and but you gotta catch a plane. Delane, thank you for doing this. I like what you stand for. I like what you're about. I think you need to do a little of reviewing if you want to connect with progressives a little more. We actually had some people get off that stream as soon as you said Dianne Feinstein. And that's something that you'll face more of. So thank you so much for doing this. Where can people learn more about you?
You can go to Delane for Governor, DELAINE-FOR, governor.com. You can go to our Facebook page. You can check out some of the debates we've had with our opponents, and fasten your seatbelt, because you'll find that some of the people running for governor in California are pretty vassal, pretty wishy-washy, and we got to have somebody with a brass backbone. We got these huge majorities, and yet the state is failing too many of its people, and we got to have somebody who's going to actually lead. Remember the old saying, the fish stinks from the head. You got to have leadership, or California is going to continue to fumble along.
All right, how about throw that website out there one more time for everybody, please? And we'll include it in the clips.
Delane, DELAINE, for FOR, governor.com, and I spell for because some people think it's a number, but it's Delane Easton for Governor also works. You can use the full name at EASTIN. We bought both venues. So either way, you can get to me.
All right, Delane, thank you so much for doing this. I really appreciate it. It's not the easiest show to do. You got people throwing you questions. You got me giving my thoughts too. People will sometimes the topics people want to bring up, I'm not even sure like what the connection is, but we're very kind of democratic here. So we just kind of throw you questions. I appreciate you doing it. Go to Delane's website. It's delaneforgovernor.com. We'll have, of course, links below. Guys, this has been Get Your News On with Ron, the world's first viewer-curated streaming news show. We do this every Tuesday through Friday at 10 a.m. Pacific Standard Time. Thank you guys so much for a great week. Thank you for your excellent questions for Delane. Follow me on Twitter at Ron Placone. That's where you tweet me articles. RonPlacone.com. We just settled on a Vegas date, by the way. Me and Graham Elwood just settled on a Vegas date. That's going to be May 11th at the Center for Science and Inquiry in Las Vegas, Nevada. So any Vegas folks, we got a date coming up. And my website has all the tour updates. I'll be at Flappers Comedy Club this weekend, tonight and tomorrow night, Friday and Saturday. Shows are at 7:30 and 9:30. Tweet at me if you want to go to that show, because I have ticket discounts, guest list spots, et cetera, et cetera. So tweet at me if you plan on showing up this weekend. Let me help you out. And last but certainly not least, again, what's that website one more time, Delane?
It's Delane for Governor, DELAINEFOR governor.com.
Thank you so much. And guys, to help keep this show on the air, patreon.com/Ron Placone for a pay what you can model if you are so able. Guys, have a fantastic weekend. Thank you so much for being here. We will see you again Tuesday at 10 a.m. Pacific Standard Time. This has been Get Your News On with Ron.
Thank you.
Thanks a lot.
Great to be with you.